All right. So if Norm were here, he would certainly give you an update on XProc, but I heard that he is having vacations in Tuscany or something, so he can't be with us. Yeah. Yeah, most. Pardon? All right. So he's in Norwich. So most of you already know what XProc is and roughly what it's for. It's a scripting language with an XML syntax and XPath as its expression language. It's chiefly targeted at processing XML and related data formats, so for example zipped XML, docx or so. It's made for orchestrating steps of individual processes that have input and output ports, and these XProc pipelines interconnect these steps. Yeah, what I already said, the purpose is orchestrating arbitrarily complex checking and conversion, database lookup pipelines, and in doing so, replacing make files and probably also AND files, yeah, all kinds of shell scripts, but with a particular focus on XML data. There's some display glitch. I tried to fix that by reloading. Okay. The history until 2010, I don't know. It started probably a couple of years earlier when XML was more popular than it was already in 2010 when it was finally published as a W3C recommendation. But the 1.0 specification was useful. There were implementations, or there are implementations. People are using it. And 3 years later, the working group consisting of Norm, Henry Thompson, Alex Milowski, and I think also at some time Jim Fuller, they started working on XProc 2.0. And then it became a bit silent about that working group, and in 2016 they, after initially improving gradually what was XProc 1.0, so giving it attribute value templates and all these nice things, and then they came up with a radically new approach that should cater to other data pipelining users, for example, more in the JavaScript domain. So it should be a universal, should become a universal data pipelining language with the new syntax, a non-XML syntax. And this new approach wasn't received so well by some people. Looking at Martin or myself, or we particularly like the XML syntax for some reasons. I come back to that later, and it didn't catch on among other data pipelining users. So the working group then a couple of months later was dissolved, and in September last year we met in Amsterdam, approximately 12 to 16 people, and discussed how we can pick it up and have an evolutionary approach to XProc 1.0. In Prague this February, we decided to call it 3.0 for two reasons. One is that 2.0 was, we felt it was a bit burned by that other approach. The other thing is that 3 dot something seems to be popular among XML specifications. Currently, there are two actively maintained implementations. One is XML Calabash by Norm, and the other is Morgana XProc by Achim Berndsen, who's there. Raise your hand. This is Achim. Last year, Achim and I stood here on the stage and presented XProc interoperability. Achim did really excellent work in harmonizing extension steps or attributes among Morgana and Calabash with the goal of standardizing these extension steps, attributes, etc. at some point. What are XProc's strengths? First, it's a declarative language, which doesn't exclude that it can be kind of verbose from time to time. One of the best things is the degree of encapsulation that it offers. So like functions, each pipeline has a signature, its input and output ports, its options. It doesn't have a step, an XProc step or pipeline. It doesn't have mutable data structures inside it, so it's really nicely encapsulated. If you ignore the things when you have I/O, when you store something to file or to database, but it's really, this encapsulation is really a blessing that enables complex pipelines because you don't have these unexpected side effects. And another thing that sets it apart from other functional languages is, for example, from XQuery, is that it has an elegant approach for giving you maybe diagnostic messages or something that you aggregated alongside a conversion pipeline and make it available at secondary output ports. So you can have the regular flow of control of data flow, the primary outputs of your steps, and you don't have to clutter them with all kinds of diagnostic output that you want to also pass along between the steps. I would say it's not as elegant as maybe monads in Haskell or so, but it's really a nice approach. This graph structure that is enabled by interconnecting these input and output ports. And one example that is facilitated by these two properties, encapsulation and also this graph structure, is we can do proper recursion in XProc. Nick demonstrated this 2 years ago here. He had a typical multi-pass XSLT transformation where he would go from raw docx data and gradually improving the intermediate XML formats until he finally arrived at the destination format. And he did this by supplying a sequence of XSLT style sheets while he supplied actually references to style sheets that were on disk, but the principle is the same. And then at each iteration drops one of these style sheets from the list, and each next style sheet then processes the output of the previous one. So this is recursive, and also I won't go into the details here. You can imagine a similar approach where you have distinct XSLT steps and plus schematron validations after each step, optional schematron validations. You can bundle these XSLTs and schematrons, you can wrap them and also have a sequence of them And the XSLTs will process the output of the previous step, and the schematron will generate SVRL. And through these recursions, the final result will once be the XSLT result, plus on another port, on a diagnostic port, the SVRLs. And this is really good that you really don't have to clutter the primary output of your steps or functions. So nice things are possible with XProc. And these are also the reasons why we, after Mark's and Shani's talk yesterday, we thought about, yeah, why did we choose XProc over ARNT? And when we chose it, we used makefiles at that time. And we didn't think about switching to ARNT, but we then switched to XProc. But now, in retrospection, we thought reasons may be that ARNT tasks store their intermediate results to disk. In XProc, you have them in memory, unless you decide to store them. And XProc has designed XPath as its expression language for making decisions about the control flow, etc. You can do that with XPath, and I think you cannot do this in ARNT scripts. And ARNT has a encapsulation facility. I think it's called MacroDev. I'm not an ARNT expert, so bear with me. And what I learned is that MacroDev has maintained some kind of global state, and XProc's encapsulation offers a higher degree of stability for complex pipelines. So Mark, now tell me who is strong and stable. Yeah, but there are obviously a couple of reasons why somebody might choose anything else over XProc. Mark has mentioned the learning curve, which even for experienced users, you run into stuff where you think, okay, is this a processor bug, or didn't I understand something correctly? And the concepts seem to be simple at first sight, but it's yeah, it has a steep learning curve, and we need to address this partly by documentation. And then many users have been turned away by some processors, bugs, or insufficient diagnostic messages. And also what Mark mentioned yesterday, a lack of basic tooling for fundamental operations such as zipping or unzipping. But this has improved over the years. I already mentioned why this proposal didn't catch on. One of the reasons is that why we liked the XML syntax is that we want to be able to generate not only XSLT by XSLT and XProc, but we also analyze, manipulate, or generate from scratch entire XProc pipelines and then evaluate them dynamically. Dynamic evaluation is not standardized yet. Calabash has its own extension step, and Morgana its own, and this is one of the things that need to be standardized in our community effort that we are now undertaking. The stated goals for XProc 3.0. One is XDM 3.1 everywhere, so we will get rid of the dreaded parameter ports and replace them with maps.
I just understood that.
And I already mentioned attribute value templates, text value templates. We want to be able to have arbitrary document types flowing between the steps, so binary files, JSON, etc. Documentation needs to be improved. I mentioned that, and the oh. And yes, and standardize most of the XProc and other vendor-specific extensions. Dependency modeling, if you have steps that only have side effects, like storing something, if you want in the next step zip the files that you stored in the first step, then the execution order is not guaranteed to be in document order. And for this, these processors provided extension attributes that were not standardized, and we will standardize them. For example, dynamic evaluation is another example. So the resources for the ongoing effort, of which we don't know when it will be finished. Maybe in the course of maybe early in 2018, maybe for XML Prague, who knows? But I think it's ambitious. You find some current and also ongoing specifications effort here on that page. I posted the link to that presentation before. There's a meeting of the informal working group tomorrow here at University College at the Cruciform building. And there's room for 18 people, and we are 12 yet. So if somebody spontaneously decides to join us, the only thing that we have to do is to enhance our lunch orders for tomorrow. So if you are interested, just let me know. And yeah, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerrit.
Yeah. Sorry, Stephen.
So is the working group, is it a community group?
No, the community group was called Data Pipelining Use Case Community Group or something like that. And we checked with W3C, and they said, maybe we shouldn't use that if the purpose is actually different from the title of that community group. So what we are currently operating under is, it's anarchy, so to say, volunteer effort. So it's not affiliated with W3C.
But I mean, it's trivial to create a community group.
Yes, and this is one thing that we want to discuss tomorrow, whether we want to form such a group, and I think we will be doing that.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I have two small observations, Gerrit. Thank you, by the way. First observation, if you change a typo, if you fix a typo in PowerPoint, you don't have to recompile.
I didn't have to recompile. I just because it's loaded from our Subversion repo, I had to edit the HTML and commit it to the repository.
Okay, that was a joke, not take it too serious, but thank you for that. The second thing is, if people might have the impression that the original working group of XProc broke up fighting and the volunteers group took over or took advantage of that situation, I think it's important to note that most of the working group actually sympathizes with this work, either actively by being involved or at least passively by sharing the work we are continuing.
Yeah. of the former working group members, at least two have been involved in relaunching this, and I think the mandate from the W3C ran out anyway, so they had to dissolve or produce a result. So it was no fighting. No,
the W3C does not.
Debbie.
User request. Any XProc pipeline I ever wrote myself eventually worked. Any XProc pipeline anybody ever passed me didn't. And I run it and get no error messages at all. You didn't know what stage you were in. You suspected it might be 1 because you got nothing. Improve the error messages. I mean, it's nice you can do external files, and I thought that slide was a joke when I first saw it, because I'm going, what external files, where? I realized that's up to the person who writes the pipeline, but it was obviously difficult because they don't do it.
Yeah, error messages.
Use another processor, you get other error
Morgana,
messages.
That's true too. Yeah,
Morgana
that's true too.
XProc has excellent error messages. Excellent.
Whose error messages?
Morgana XProc.
Morgana, okay.
Yeah, try it out.
I've heard that, but you understand why that's a problem for a user.
Yes, it's a problem for learners. You do something wrong, you get an error message with, oops, something went wrong.
No,
Yes,
I never got anything.
You never got anything.
Nothing.
Okay, can you send me the pipeline?
Yeah, then maybe it's just a configuration error. I don't know.
What I learned is that XProc is a write-only language. I can write it, but I cannot use it if someone else does.
We try to improve.
Yes.
We try to improve it.
As a volunteer effort, we will try to help you individually, but also we will try to improve documentation. All right.
Okay, thank you, Gerrit.